to the Dole Institute of Politics. My name is Ava Levin, and I am a sophomore studying political science, English, and Spanish on the pre-law track here at KU. This is my second year on the Student Advisory Board and my first as a discussion group coordinator. My time at the Dole Institute has been enjoyable. Two of my favorite experiences from last semester were receiving the Director's Award for volunteering at the annual student banquet and participating in the counselors program with Washburn Law students to discuss the morality of medical aid in dying. The Dole Institute of Politics strives to promote a new era of leadership that uses politics to bring people together through opportunities that emphasize bipartisan cooperation, public service, and civic education and engagement, all of which is inspired by the leadership and service of Senators Bob and Elizabeth Dole and the enduring civic contributions of the greatest generation. The Student Advisory Board is an integral part of this mission, providing members with experiential learning and job opportunities, access to financial assistance, and networking opportunities with our special guests. If you are a student here at KU and would like to join, please email us at dolesab@ku.edu or speak with a student worker after the program. Before we begin, there are a few reminders I'd like to take a moment to share. Following tonight's program, a video recording will be available to stream on demand on our YouTube channel, where you can access a full catalog of our past programming. A loop hearing system is available to use if you have a T-coil hearing aid. The Institute also has a limited number of listening devices. If you have questions about the loop system, or if at any time have difficulty hearing, please alert one of our staff members. Please take a moment to familiarize yourself with the marked exits in the room. In the event of an emergency, please make your way to the nearest marked exit. Please follow the instructions of staff members and exit the building if necessary. Following tonight's interview, a limited number of audience questions will be answered. If you are part of our virtual audience, you can submit questions via email at dolequestions@ku.edu. The Dole Institute aims to foster civil and respectful discussion around important and often difficult topics. Please phrase your question with this in mind. Finally, I'd like to remind you to please silence your cell phones or place them on Do Not Disturb. Now, please join me in welcoming Audrey Coleman.
Thanks, Ava. I'll keep this brief so we can turn it over to our panel, but it is a pleasure to welcome you to the Dole Institute this afternoon, and thank you so much for being curious about hearing about bipartisanship. It still exists. I'll turn it over to you, Joni. Thank you so much for being our moderator again this afternoon.
Thank you, Audrey, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this lovely, lovely October afternoon. You are in for a treat. We have two amazing leaders who are going to share their story and how they gasped, clutch your pearls, work across the aisle to solve problems. I have with me today State Representative Laura Williams and State Representative Brandon Woodard. Thank you both for being here so much. If you would please tell us a little bit about your public service journey and why did you choose this type of path? We'll start with you.
Great, thank you, and thank you for having me and being here today. I'm Representative Laura Williams, and I started serving my first term in 2023. I won my first election in 22. But what really drew me to politics, I was telling them in the back room, my parents would say I'm the last child that they would have thought that would have ran for public office. But what really got me involved into politics was I started a small business when my daughter was 4 months old, and I just saw firsthand government stifling business back in 2017, and it made me want to dig in more to understand why that happened and recognizing that government can either work well with business or could really just stifle business. And So I started to investigate what it would look like to become more involved. And the more I dug, the more I realized there's not a lot of young people like me who have the same experiences and perspectives. And so when I looked at all of the options, I thought, well, if I'm not going to do it, then who's going to do it? That's kind of how I've approached a lot of different problems in my life of, okay, maybe I'm the solution. And so I decided to run for public office in 2020.
Awesome. Representative Woodard.
Hi everyone, Brandon Woodard. I represent the 108th District, which is parts of Lenexa where I live, as well as parts of Olathe and Overland Park. I got my start in public service here at the University of Kansas. I got involved in almost every different academic club, organization that you could think of, and realized I was burning myself out my freshman, sophomore year. And so I had a friend and a mentor. I was working nights at Lawrence Memorial Hospital and working nights, weekends at St. Francis Health Center in Topeka doing non-clinical, patient billing work to pay the bills so I could afford coming here. And one of my mentors was like, "You seem miserable." I was like, "Well, I have like 4 jobs and I'm not like involved on anything. I'm like spreading myself too thin." And so that was the semester that I chose to really dive into student union activities and student senate, and worked with one of the coalitions. My first 2 years, I was just part of the one planning the party bus, honestly, and then got more involved and realized that I could make a difference through Student Senate. So I ran for a position there, won, and then immediately got appointed to the cabinet. And so we did a lot with the Student Legislative Awareness Board, going over to Topeka during a time where the budget was much, much tighter. It's tight now, but it was even tighter back then. And ultimately was student body vice president my senior year. And so, as a 22-year-old, I'm there as the president of the Senate, overseeing a staff of 10 and a $24 million budget, and realized the importance of state investment in higher education. And so we were advocating in Topeka week after week. And that was actually the 2012 session where legislators not only were considering concealed carry on college campuses, which I led the coalition of student government leaders, the chancellor and the university presidents, as well as our public safety offices and faculty senates all unanimously opposed that. And then I still watched a bipartisan coalition in Topeka pass that law. And that was the kind of the moment when I realized that you can really make a difference, and one voice in the State House can make a difference. And so when I moved to Lenexa after graduating from KU, I had a representative that refused to meet with me, would not pick up the phone. I would drive to Topeka and he would cancel those meetings. And so enough of my friends talked me into stepping up and ousting someone who just wasn't doing a good job. And so I was really kind of excited to step up. Then in 2020, I had my toughest re-election ever because Laura was running and working her tail off. But luckily I was able to succeed and be there, and now, fast forward to several years later, we're able to stand up for our communities and find those common ground issues that we're able to work on together.
So, point of clarification, you two actually ran against each other for the same seat, and now that you're both elected, you work together.
Yes.
Yep. Wow. So are there different perspectives or different leadership core values that you bring to conversations when you guys are working on these nitty-gritty, often contentious policy issues in order to create some sort of solution?
Maybe I'll kick us off. Being in the super minority, meaning there are 37 Democrats and there are 88 Republicans, and the magic number to pass a bill is 63. So that means that I have to go find, quick math in my head, 26 other people outside of my caucus that will step up and work with us. And there are many of us that work across the aisle that are very solutions focused, that do get a little bit of pause from the other members of our caucus, whether they're more progressive or centrist or not. They're like, "You're spending too much time with Republicans." And we try to reiterate to them, there are 37 of us, it takes 63 people to pass a bill. The math ain't mathin'. And so, yeah, I mean, I think we have to work to build coalitions, and there's been times on different issues where it's one of the most socially conservative members voting with one of the most liberal Republicans with some of the most progressive Democrats that come up with an issue and find those solutions. Medical marijuana comes to mind. We had a coalition on the Fed and State Committee that I served on for the first 3 years I was in Topeka. And that committee handles a lot of the controversial social issues that you read about in the papers. I always said God, gays, gambling, alcohol, and abortion all go through Fed and state. But when it came to medical marijuana in the House, we were able to, on an 11-11 vote, have a coalition of Democrats and Republicans that worked to get that bill out of committee onto the floor, which the House ultimately passed and still to this day has not been passed by the Senate.
I think, when it comes to policy, Brandon's side of the aisle could easily tank a bill that we've worked very hard on. And, when it comes to policy, you're invested in it. There's a story behind it. There's a solution a problem you're trying to bring the solution for. And so even though I am in the supermajority, I still want to make sure that members on the other side of the aisle, at least I've heard their perspective if we don't agree. I get their advice on maybe there's something I'm missing here from this bill that could cause a huge issue later on and totally tank the bill. And now we, can't finish the bill this session and we have to wait until next year. And so I think it's important to build relationships, have those conversations. You don't always have to agree, but you can start, through that strategy, I guess. But I feel like it's pretty genuine of connection and communication and making sure that you're listening and asking questions. And so that's kind of the strategy I've taken. And a lot has been shown to me by other leaders in the State House, whether it's Brandon or it's people within my own party. It's okay to have those relationships across the aisle because really at the same time we're trying to accomplish the same thing. We just see it differently and have a different perspective about how you get to that solution.
Can you give one concrete example of a policy issue that you two have worked on together?
Well, Brandon had one that we did in our radio interview that I totally forgot about.
Yeah, so actually while we were running against one another, there was a constituent in the district that we were both running to represent that had a former teacher that was stalking a student. And because of the fact that the student didn't know they were being stalked, we found a loophole in the law. And so we were actually, the family convened a group of us and said, either Brandon or Laura is going to be in Topeka. We want you to be one of the champions of this. We met with the district attorney. We met with the family law enforcement to figure out how we can make sure that if this ever happens again, we can't, because of a loophole in the law, have someone that creepy only spend 1 year in jail, right? The malicious intent was there, but because of that loophole. But we were able to bring legislation that next term that was bipartisan. Representative Megan Lynn at the time from Olathe got the whole Olathe delegation to sign on. Oftentimes, if a Democrat's name is on a bill, it does tank the bill, but it was very important to the Olathe delegation and the legislative leadership that it be bipartisan, so I worked on that with them, and ultimately we passed that bill 125-0 in the House, 40-0 in the Senate, and this governor signed it the day after it was on her desk. And that was just the start, and I, fast forward to this session with childcare.
This session, we had a couple different bills. We had probably the largest bipartisan work was our child care bill, and that was one that took, ever since I first came into office working on that issue, it was a lot of conversations behind closed doors of talking to people, trying to have them understand the importance of solving some of these child care issues, hearing their perspective and what they think are issues, and vetting the legislation and changing it and making sure we had coalition partners all on board. It was a heavy lift, and at times it felt like the barriers weren't ones we were going to be able to break through, but I think it was probably our largest bipartisan win, and for me that's important. I have 2 kids, and when I first ran for office they were 4 and 2, and so I saw the problems of childcare. I didn't understand, maybe the complexity of how you solve those problems, but I recognized, as a woman who is in the workforce, we need to be able to prioritize these things. So it was fun to be able to come in and work with women on both sides of the aisle and, with Brandon as well. So we had that issue, another one within our community, and it was nearly unanimous when it came to a bail issue. And it was a very hard bail, and writing that legislation is a very hard thing because bail is constitutional, and working with revisers and working with both Democrats and Republicans on judiciary and on the House floor, and then over in the Senate. There are a lot of obstacles we have to go through as legislators to make sure we are doing the right thing. And so those are just 2 wins even just from this session.
And I would add one other thing too, is that a lot of what you don't hear about is the stuff that we stop behind those closed door conversations. We're able to build those coalitions to say, this bill, sure, someone in the legislature really cares about it on either side, but when we're able to find out that there's just truly no way it gets to 63 votes, or there may be votes, and then we explain, here's the implications of what this bill actually could do. Having our attorneys for the legislature, those revisers in the room to help us have those conversations, there's a lot more that we stop that doesn't come to a vote through those conversations as well.
I've heard you both talk about how much you've appreciated getting to know each other as people, and how building that relationship helps you build trust. It helps you really understand the lived experience that you're both bringing to creating these solutions. Tell us a little bit about what you've learned from each other as people in terms of leadership, if there's life lessons you've learned just from working with each other across the aisle.
I think it's a unique experience that we share, that we ran against one another. And we both come from a very competitive district, both separate districts now. And so we kind of have that common understanding of, we fought really hard to be there. And we fought really hard to represent our community. And I think from the start, that was really what built the foundation of us being able to work across the aisle. And I think it, too, goes back to when we first ran. I met Brandon at a restaurant. He walked past me, and it's kind of like it humanizes him. Like, he's not just a guy on a mailer or a guy in an ad. This is a guy who lives down the street from me. And so just being able to shake hands and introduce myself to him and get to know him a little bit better, it just humanizes. And I think we lose that a little bit in politics. I think everyone gets to see the crazy headlines that the media like to put out, but us getting along and passing a bill unanimously or nearly unanimous isn't all that newsworthy. And so I think, whenever I first came into the State House in 23, Brandon had relationships with folks across the aisle. And so that was already something that he had established and had done well at. And so that felt, to me, like, okay, I can talk to him. We can build a friendship here, and we can find things that we have in common. And he has shared, or he has unique perspectives that he brings to the table that I don't have. And so being able to listen, ask questions, just gives me a broader understanding of both sides of an issue.
Yeah, I think through that process, I realized, okay, she goes to the same restaurant I do and likes a patio beverage. She goes to the same Starbucks. I run into her or her husband half the time I go to Starbucks when I'm near where we both live. And I think more than anything, with both of us, but also just working across the aisle, you realize that Topeka is not like DC. Sure, there's some of that negativity and some of that poison that's infecting the State House with certain people, but at the end of the day, it's just other Kansans that are willing to take 3 or 4 months away from their life that care about making Kansas a better place for everyone. Sure, there are certainly debates where I have to take a little step and a little breath outside, because I'm like, how on earth could they possibly ever think that or vote that way? But I can take my toys and go home, or there are instances where there was an issue where a social issue that I was super opposed to, worked really hard to defeat, and we lost. And yet I had to go from that conversation where the 2 main proponents that were pushing for this bill were also the chair and vice chair on higher education budget. I could have gone in, guns blazing, being pissed off, and truly just being frustrated with the process, but instead I did my job. I worked with them, I negotiated, and out of that budget committee, we passed the most significant investment in higher education in the history of Kansas. We can take our toys and go home when we're mad, or we can compartmentalize and realize that we can win one issue and then we can turn around and lose, and yet at the end of the day, that's just us doing our job, and that takes that coalition building and realizing that these are just people at the end of the day that are trying to make our state better.
What shifts in political rhetoric have you all observed in politics since you started serving?
Ooh. Never thought we would be in a place where the law enforcement at the state level and the Secret Service are doing briefings for legislators on how to keep themselves safe, on how to stay safe at home and in public, to scrub their personal data, phone numbers, addresses from the website, because there are people out here that just because of who we are or what we're doing, want to see us not able to do the job anymore. I think between that and just generally, like, you look at any social media and they always say don't read the comments, right? But like, it's some of the most vile and nasty things that are out there when, you know, sure, Representative Ho Heisel from Wichita and I love sniping back at each other on Twitter, and then we have a sidebar conversation about like, yeah, good spin, I guess, but like, delete your account. But truly, I mean, the number of responses that people on both sides of the aisle and the hate that they get for just trying to do their job is really alarming and concerning.
Yeah, I mean, after 2020, I think I had to get off of Twitter just to know, like, okay, I'm not going to win a voter over on this space. And I don't think that we are designed to get constant information via social media. And while it's good, I think it's good that we have a presence there. You know, from going from 2020 till now, nothing's really changed. It all feels the same, if not, it gets accelerated and more intense. And so I feel like when I stepped into politics, this is kind of how it has been, and just something to get used to, I guess, which I think is sad. But I think, you know, things like this of showing, hey, here are two candidates that have run against one another. You all probably have family members you don't 100% agree with politically, and yet you still have to figure out how to have a relationship with them and, you know, go home to the Thanksgiving table and talk and get to know one another and ask questions and care for them. And we need our leaders to lead out in that. And so that's how, when I've stepped into office, that's kind of what I wanted to portray is we can work across the aisle, but we can also politically disagree on things. But we can also work together too, and we need to lead out in that.
When you're in your districts talking to your constituents, do you feel like the average person on the street sitting at Starbucks is as divided as what it seems when you open Facebook and when you tune into the evening news?
I mean, a lot of the constituents I grab coffee with, we don't agree. And I do that to help myself better ask questions and understand where people are coming from. And usually those are the people reaching out. You don't usually reach out to someone if you agree or don't have a problem with them. And so I think those conversations kind of make me feel like, okay, it's not crazy out there. But then also I think that there's probably room for us to improve on that.
I would agree. I think back to the COVID pandemic in 2020 when the state government shut down, life shut down, really. And there were a lot of people who were laid off from their jobs. Our unemployment system had earlier, like 8 years before, they'd canceled the modernization because it took, I think we're still almost not quite done with the modernization project because it takes 5 years. But I had hundreds, and I've never had this much constituent outreach, but hundreds of people per day reaching out, saying they needed help with unemployment, they needed to get assistance, and they were like, I've gone 8 weeks without a paycheck, the system won't let me upload this, the federal programs aren't coming through yet, I don't know what to do. And I was shocked by the number of people who said, I'm sorry, I didn't vote for you, but my family needs help. And I was like, my job is to represent the 23,000 people in this district. I don't care if you voted for me or not. I won. I'm your representative now, and this is my job to help you. And so I think I was like taken back a little bit that people even think that because they're of one political persuasion, like we're not going to help them or help their families. And I'm like, you have 3 young kids that need food on your table. Of course I'm going to help you. So I think that was the flip side of, I don't think people are that divided, but I do think that they are surprised when they send a nasty email and we pick up the phone and call them and just say, hey, I want to hear you out on this. Like, it's probably more productive to meet over coffee or have that conversation human to human. Mm-hmm. And you can just feel the tension on the phone or when you're meeting with them just kind of go away. And so I think it is on us as leaders to show them that, like, yes, I can disagree with Laura after a tough vote on a big social issue, but I also know that she's willing to work with us on things that are beneficial to both of our communities.
So we've talked a lot about the two of you working together and agreeing on things. How do you approach disagreements? like when there's a policy issue that you guys just don't see eye to eye on? How do you proceed from there?
I mean, it's easy with Laura because it's just like, oh, we're not there. It's okay.
Yeah.
Like, and again, I think it goes back to I have to go find 60 or 26 other people to get to 63 votes. Or if the Democratic governor has vetoed a bill, I have to make sure that all 37 of our Democrats in the caucus are solid, and then have to go find 5 Republicans that will vote to sustain the governor's veto, or beyond vacation, which counts as a no vote as well. And so, yeah, I mean, I think the more challenging ones are the ones who are not willing to have those conversations and will go, scream at you after a thing, or, go to the floor and at the the podium that we speak from, and tell people that your argument was terrible and whatever. Like, I don't know, I feel like I've just gotten very good at knowing when to walk away and being like, yeah, well, I could spend time trying to win this person over who has made it very clear where they're at, or I can go find the 5 people who are like, hey, I'm open, I need to know more.
Yeah, it's funny, I tell my friends, I'm like, sometimes anger is the only emotion that's acceptable in the State House, and I don't think that has to be that way. As millennials, conflict's probably not something we love to deal with. But I do think it's like when we disagree or we see things differently, it's good to talk about it. And, there are times where Brandon knows I'm frustrated, I know he's frustrated, and we can kind of put all aside, walk across the street, grab a cup of coffee or grab a drink, and just, be friends. We don't have to, sit there and debate out this policy issue we disagreed with. We can sit there and try to talk and unwind and get to know one another better. I think that's how, whether it's Brandon or even some of my own colleagues where we've disagreed on, a piece of legislation, it's really easy for me just to be really mad and let my blood boil for a second. But walking into their office and sitting down and clearly communicating and talking and sharing, my frustrations, but trying to find compromise, it's very hard to do, but I've learned that doing that has been the best thing to do. And it's the best thing for Kansans. It's, I think, like Brandon said, you can, pack up your toys and go home, or you can kind of put yourself aside and then try to have a clearly communicate to those folks.
Which I think is the opposite of, being from purple districts, we've both been summoned to the speaker's office or majority leader's office. And in my experience, there was an issue where they said, here's the polling in your district. If you don't vote with us, we're going to come after you. And I had to, at 29 years old, kind of giggle that this, person that's like my father's age is screaming at me because he can't get the votes. And I remember sitting there and just said, you yelling at me tells me that your supermajority doesn't have the votes on this bill. And I, unlike you, have to look myself in the eye after this vote. So I'm actually going to go unless you have anything else to talk about. And I think it's just, maybe just some of us have been through therapy and know how to deal with conflict, and others really could benefit from we have a doctor of the day, maybe we need a therapist of the day in the State House as well.
We have had a therapist a few different times.
Yes.
So it sounds like both of you in your work across the aisle maybe have encountered your colleagues a little bit reticent to work with you because of the R or the D that's in front of your name. How do you build trust with those types of individuals?
Well, a lot of the times it's not really partisan issues. It's, their way or the highway. And I think that is hard at times to be able to work through, but being even a part, I'm a part of a caucus of 88. So you have 88 different personalities. You have 88 different perspectives. You have 88 different relationships you have to build. And at the end of the day, I'm not going to be best friends with all of them. But we can still work together. And when it comes to policy and policy wins, it's a lot of conversations of, slowly walking through a piece of legislation, or apologizing to someone because I was short to them, or trying to be my best self, because if I can't bring that to the table, then I can't expect them to do that either. And so for me, working with 88, it's difficult at times, but that's okay. We don't all have to be best friends. I don't have to be best friends with Brandon, but we can work together and find ways to clearly communicate and share where we both are coming from.
Yeah, I think that's the benefit of, I mean, I would never want to go over to the Senate because there's only 40 of them, and they all have egos and they talk too much. But that's the benefit of having 125 people, right? Like, the only thing I can control is how I vote yes or no on the floor. I can work with other people, I can try to influence them. But I think at the end of the day, the theme that we keep going back to is treating people like humans, like the Kansans that they are, that they care about making the state better. One of our, I called them Votorama days, but it was like conference committee week or something. And I think we had 38 or 39 different bills on the floor that day. We had already taken like 47 final action votes in the morning, which we can't get out of our seats while we're voting. So it's like 2 hours later, you're like, I had my coffee, got to run to the restroom. But I sat in front of, and I don't know if this was a troll from the former speaker or what, but he put the two first openly LGBT lawmakers in front of two of the most, based on their voting record, anti-LGBT lawmakers. And so I just walk in every day being like, this guy votes against my rights every single chance he gets. He probably hates me. I'm not talking to him. And then one of those days that we were stuck on the floor, those are sometimes 14, 16-hour days. We had one session where we were there for literally 24 hours. We gavelled out at 7:58 a.m. so they didn't have to pay us another $88 for the next day. People get real weird in the middle of the night. But we were there for a really long time that day, and I turned around to this representative, and because he just voted no on everything. And I said, damn, does that green button even work? And he started cackling. I have never heard this man talk. And he starts cackling, and then from that, I was like, wait, this is a human who's also been here for 14 hours and is over-caffeinated and like just wants to go home to this family. And so after that, we started a relationship talking about, I realized I could get a little glow out of him when he would talk about his grandkids. And ultimately, he was like asking me about the person I was dating, and I was like, this guy voted against everything I ever, my existence. And he's not going to change his mind on that issue. But I was able to find a way to at least share with him my perspective, and he was able to do the same thing.
That's great. So we have a lot of students in the audience, both here in person with us at the Dole Institute and also watching online. A lot of them are interested in working behind the scenes at the Capitol or within departments. Tell us a little bit about how you work with staff at the state Capitol and then also within state government departments.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I may not be an expert in every single policy issue, and that's what's great about the State House is we have revisors and lawyers who work for us who can help us bring our ideas to life and kind of give us guidance and what the law says and advise us in that way. And so that has been helpful to me because I thought coming into office, I'm not prepared, I'm not qualified to do this. And you really have a team, a giant toolbox full of tools and resources that you get to be able to use in the State House. And so I think the revisors and research has been tremendous in crafting legislation, but it's fun to have interns. So if there are any college students who want to intern next session, we would love to have you. But it's fun to be able to add that life to the State House in having interns work for us, because then it's helpful too. We only have so many hours in the day, and if you're packed with a morning committee, an afternoon committee, and then a late afternoon committee, you really don't even have time to read the bills for the next day that you're hearing or work on a policy issue that you are wanting to prioritize. And so those interns help us kind of fill in the gaps and do research for us and help us monitor our bills in other committees. And so that's been cool. I had an intern this last session. She was from K-State. I'm a Jayhawk, so please don't, throw eggs at me. But she was from K-State, and it was fun to have her there, and it was fun to hear her perspective as a college student. I think they are the next generation of leaders, and their ideas are amazing. So it's fun to have that bit of life in the State House.
Yeah, I would ditto a lot of that. I think the legislative internship program is intentionally built to, they have gotten a lot better with programming on top of just helping out, right? We could tell you a couple of the members that you're just going to get them coffee. So if you want recommendations on either side for who you should work with, we've got you on who to work with and who not to. But I think that's a really great way. There's a lot of different advocacy organizations too that work with folks. So like this upcoming session, we're bringing on several different legislative interns who are going to be committee monitors. Once someone's done that for one session, every lobbying firm is going to try to hire them because they know how to follow legislation, they know how to do the bill tracking systems. And I think I've watched every single one of my legislative interns go directly into something government related, whether it's advocacy, lobbying, public service themselves, city management. Laura mentioned the revisers and research. You know, all of the researchers, I don't think they all have master's degrees, but they're all like some of the most brilliant people that I can just go say, hey, these other 5 states have done this. I know that that's not a thing Kansas can do. And they'll just sit there and brainstorm of like, well, what if we tried this or that? And then I'm doing political mindset of like, okay, if we did this, I could get this block of like 10 more social conservative people, but they care about this issue on board. I can get more progressives on it if we change this little part of this bill. So they're there to like help us. So a lot of you that go to grad school, that's a really great path. It is still public service, so those are the most underpaid graduate alums and lowest paid, underpaid attorneys in the state as well. But I think that between that, the legislative internship, if that's something you can't commit to, I do a state rep for a day program. So I've had over 150 Kansans now who have showed up, followed me for a day. My day in the life looks a lot different now as minority leader than it did as a member that served on committees and some very busy committees. But that's one of those ways that even if you're just like, hey, this is just something I want to learn more about, come follow us around for a day. If you are more progressive leaning, Loud Light is a really great organization to get involved with. They are nonpartisan, they're a nonprofit, but a lot of the issues they align with are probably a little center left, but they have paid fellowships. I know organizations, if you're more conservative leaning, Run Gen Z has a really great like training program to build a pipeline of people to run for public service. And so there's a lot of really great ways that you can engage right now. If you're not in Student Senate, work with them on their advocacy day for Higher Education Day. Go over to the State House with them. They schedule all those meetings for you. But I think Laura and I are both really great resources too. So if you want to find out ways to get more involved, reach out to either one of us.
Mm-hmm. Let's jump ahead into the future just a little bit. Pretend for a second that you are at the end of your elected service. You're closing that chapter.
Can't wait.
How will you know that you've been successful at the end of your elected service?
That's a hard question. I feel like, we're just a drop in the bucket, but I do think that we get to steer, some of the direction and influence. If this was my last session, I would be proud of what, I've been able to do. In the relationships I've been able to build and how I've been able to represent my community in Topeka. I think I came in with, having childcare and starting the Office of Early Childhood and really streamlining that industry. It feels like a huge accomplishment, and I know that I didn't do it for me. I did it for all the moms that come after me and all the parents who need childcare and want to work outside of the home and need to work outside of the home and have affordable and accessible opportunities to childcare. So if the book were to close and that was my last chapter, I feel like it was awesome. It was fun to be a part of something bigger than myself.
I think the beauty of the House specifically is that we're only guaranteed 2 years at a time. There's some members in seats where they're fine, or I've been very lucky to get a free pass and be unopposed the last 2 cycles, but we're only promised those 2 years. And so I try to go into the session every single day, especially the second year when we're up for re-election. I leave the State House very emotional because that could be the last time. That's up to the people to decide whether or not we get to go back. So whenever that time comes, I do think that it is just looking back to know that I didn't compromise my values or my vote. I stood up for the things that I cared about, was a very, very vocal person about some issues that just really had never really been focused on or discussed in that building. And hopefully, we're one of 6,000 Kansans that have gotten to sit in that chamber. Specifically the House, we're sitting in the same chamber that Kathleen Sebelius sat in when she started, that Bob Dole sat in, that Jerry Moran sat in, and Laura Kelly was on the other side of the building, but we got to, it's every single day still, 7 years in, next year will be my 8th year. Every day we walk on the floor, even on the days that I know are going to be so brutal, I still get butterflies when I walk on the floor. I think that when those butterflies go away and the joy that comes with the honor of this office that we hold, once that goes away, it's time to pack your things and move on to the next thing. So whenever the closing chapter is, a couple of years, yeah, I just hope that I can continue to feel like I do now, which is I stood up, I did my best, I fought for the people that I got the honor of representing, and I can still look myself in the mirror after I take the votes that I do.
I have one more question, so get your questions ready for this great group of elected leaders that we have. And if you are watching this at home or in your office, you can also send questions to dolequestions@ku.edu. So my last question is one that I ask every person who joins our discussion group. You don't have to look very far to see that civility is often missing in today's political discourse. That can lead to people kind of wanting to check out and say, it's just too messy, I don't want to deal with this, I don't want to follow politics and government anymore. So my question for you is it too messy, or is it still worth it to be engaged in civic leadership?
It is messy, and it is worth it. I think, social media has really destroyed this level of civility that we have. So I think having those conversations outside of your phone and in person is important. I think it's important for elected officials to meet with their constituents and meet with folks face to face and have them see that they're real people and for them to see that we're real people too. But it's a grind, it's not easy, and it's something that we should choose to do every day.
Ditto. No, I mean, there are certainly times I think we all feel like it would be easier to just walk away, but that's when democracies crumble. I mean, they say a republic if you can keep it, and that's for a reason. So I think that it is on us as state leaders, not that I disagree, but Kamala Harris's comments and quotes yesterday, I don't think are helpful in the same way that the current president's rhetoric about the other side is helpful. It's actually very dangerous. And I think that we all as leaders have a responsibility to tone down the rhetoric. There will be an era where Trumpism is over. I look to my Republican friends to rebuild the party of Lincoln and Eisenhower here in Kansas and go back to stepping up at the federal level to do their job and not cave to anything that this current administration asks them to do. This country has survived world wars, depressions, recessions, and I feel like we cannot give up hope yet that there will be a day where we can restore that civility and get back to truly working together and doing the best for each other and neighbors.
And I think it all starts with us. Like every single one of us in this room are watching. It's Brandon and I's job to lead from a leadership perspective, but it also starts with us in our personal lives as well.
Well said. What questions do you all have for these awesome leaders? Yes, right here in the front.
I kind of have two, but I'll try to make them easy. So first, in the halls of bipartisanship here, do you see things that are structural that could be changed at the state level that could foster more bipartisanship? In other words, are there structural barriers to or conflicts that could be removed? And the second question, as I walk past this elephant in the room, how are you going to either support or not support a special session for redistricting? And I hope there's a bipartisan answer to that. Thank you.
Well, I think this last session, we were within a 90-day calendar period. Well, you talk to some lobbyists and they're glad that they got out early and they didn't have to go through May. It does put a little bit of a toll on us to be able to not mess up legislation or have unintended consequences. And so I think structurally that is one thing that was very glaring. It's very hard to work together when you're in a pressure cooker. And that's something that I hope changes in the future. just to kind of give us a little bit more time so we don't make big mistakes and at the cost of Kansans. You know, on redistricting, I know it's been a topic of conversations, and you have both sides of the aisle, you know, sharing their own perspective of it, whether it's our governor calling for the Democrat Governors Association to redistrict in their states to now Kansas calling it. I know it's up for discussion, but I think the life of it, you know, has still been yet to unfold.
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, on the redistricting, people love political theater, right? They don't talk about the issues that we stop or the things we work together on, but they do talk a lot about anything that involves conflict. And I think that's also on us to just highlight more of when we are working together. I looked it up. Our like lifetime voting records actually at like 86% the same. And so at least when it comes to redistricting, we're continuing to have conversations. We're working with a coalition of people to educate Kansans on what that costs, what that looks like. What they're hoping to do has already happened once. And voters responded by sending that representative back to DC by her biggest margin yet. So I do think that there are a lot of conversations happening. I've certainly been on the phone with people on both sides of the aisle to potentially prevent this. Ultimately, I think that we see a special session that does get called, even though we could do this in January. I'll be voting no either way, but I do think that it's one of those issues that we will potentially see the group meet, but this is also a very busy time for legislators. They're away at legislative conferences, they're traveling, they're trying to get time in with their family or vacations with their family before we go back to session. And so, you know, the Senate is always a little more united when it comes to their supermajority. I think on the House side, it's to be seen whether or not they can cobble together enough votes to override a very likely veto from the governor. And then structurally, not in a pressure cooker with no breaks 12 weeks in a row, where we're working on Fridays again, which was before a time that we could go back and have coffee with constituents and meet with them. And I don't know if it was intentional or not, but I think the less time we spend in the district, the more time people in that building listen to one another versus the people they were elected to represent. And otherwise, you know, I think there's a lot of concepts that are out there. Like you look at states with ranked choice voting and whether the pros and cons of that and how it kind of makes people run to the middle because, you know, there is this group of progressive left that so many of my friends are a part of that are like, you know, I never want you talking to Republicans, I never want you doing any of these things. And I'm like, well, if I'm going to stop any of these things, it's going to require Republican votes, right? Same thing on, you know, the further right. I do think that bipartisanship has somehow become what we think is a bad word. But that's only because of the people that are very loud on both sides of the aisle. And so, you know, you look at polling, you look at issue opinion surveys in Kansas, and people just want someone, I mean, there were literally focus groups for Governor Kelly ahead of the 2022 reelect that realized that they identified Trump voters that liked Laura Kelly because she governed from the middle, she beat Chris Kobach, and she got rid of the food sales tax. That's all they remembered. So they leaned in on all of those things with those voters. I was with her political pollster team the day after the August 2nd of 2022 vote, and they said, if we focus on these three issues, if we can get 58% of the vote in Johnson County, the governor's race is over. I think she won 58.9 or something like that because she's an overachiever. But I think it comes down to those issues of just listening to people.
Next question, yes.
So I'm going to preface my question by saying 2 months ago I moved here from Lafayette, Louisiana, and I worked in the past 3 legislative sessions. I worked in the last 3 sessions, and bipartisanship doesn't appear to be there in Louisiana. So how unique or how common is your relationship, your working relationship, the two of you? How common or uncommon is it?
I think it depends on the state, right? Like I was baffled by the first legislative conference I went to, which is called the Future Summit, and it's Future Caucus is a national organization of legislators 45 and under. And I was baffled by a Democrat from Arizona who was they had just gotten out of session or some special session, and he was going on and on about how he could not stand Republicans at all. And I was like, y'all are in a 1-seat minority. What do you mean you can't find one person to vote with you? And I was shocked because at my first session, at the time, Kansas was still much closer to what we would have considered traditionally a three-party system, right? You had this block of moderate Republicans, depending on the issue. You had more conservative Republicans, and you had Democrats. And so my first session, there were 41 Democrats and about 30, depending on the issue, moderate Republicans. So while the conservatives had the speaker's gavel, we had a majority coalition, a governing coalition, if you will. So I think it comes out of the states, right? Like if you're in a one-seat majority or minority, there's so much more pressure to be partisan and just stick with your tribe. And you know, I think in states like Louisiana, where it's in the instance of, well, it's different from Kansas, right? But it's a super majority. They have no incentive to work with Democrats. Why would they don't need their vote for anything, right? Where I think that Kansas, having a Democratic governor, it forces us to the table. As minority leader, I'm laser focused on making sure we pick up seats next election year. We saw the firsthand what happens when we lost the 3 seats that we lost last year. If we would have lost one more, it would have been 1 seat on appropriations tax and Fed and state. So many of those issues are 11 to 11. And so some of the things we're able to pass with 7 Democrats and 4 Republicans in the chair voting for it wouldn't be possible. So I think it's dependent on the state, but Kansas just, we're weird and unique in the way that it's just, Kansas nice.
Yeah, to me it feels common. So to see it happen, you know, not happen everywhere else. And it's not just like me being a competitive seat makes me more okay with being friends across the aisle. It's like even our deepest red districts have friends across the aisle as well. And there are folks that have been there for a very long time and have served and honestly have bled out in those relationships. So that's just kind of all that I know. So I don't know if it's common or uncommon. It feels common to me.
I'm curious if you both feel like the governor has helped set that tone. Being in the role of governor, you have a really large bully pulpit. Do you feel, and I imagine if she were throwing daggers at Republicans all the time, it may not change your specific dynamic, but it may change the conditions in which you work in the state capitol. What do you think?
I mean, I said this on our radio interview, that when the governor created her middle of the road PAC, I was her first ad spend. Yet when we come into session, this past session, we work together on childcare. So I think some of it has to do with both sides have to be willing to work with one another and finding that common ground. So while the governor has been in office for the last 7 years, people have had to decide that they want to work with her or they want to get something done for all Kansans. And you kind of have to put elections aside, walk through the state house doors and get stuff done. So you got to let it roll off your sleeve. And you know, for me, I probably could grow a little bit thicker skin. It still gets to me sometimes, but I know that if I let it get to me, then it comes at the disadvantage of my constituents.
Yeah, a phrase I use a lot, both with constituents who are like, how on earth would they never vote for this? Or why can't you stop this? And I just say, this is the House and the Senate that the people of Kansas gave us. And when it comes to Governor Kelly, I think, you know, she is very no nonsense, and she can be very scary sometimes in a nice way, but she's a good negotiator. And I think if you were asking the legislative leadership that works with her, you know, I meet with the governor every week. The Senate president and House Speaker meet with her every week as well. You know, of course, there are times where their press releases are a little like back and forth and cringy, just like we see at our level. But I think if you asked in a private room, legislative leadership would probably say they enjoy working with her because she is honest and has had to work with a Republican supermajority for 7 years now on things like the COVID pandemic and public health access and modernizing unemployment and things that we never thought we could accomplish, but we're able to do because we were willing in the House and Senate to negotiate, as well as the governor being able to say, I'm not going to sign that, that's where I draw the line, but here's something I could consider. And those conversations, you know, I do think make for better policy.
Next question.
We do have a question from our online audience. As someone who is interested in increasing young voter participation, what messages do you think will work to reach young Kansans?
So I represent the youngest district in Kansas. I believe it's something like, the voters are a little bit different, but the profile of the district is about 90% of the district are under age 65. I have the most renters in the state, and so I couldn't continue to represent the district, I believe, if I didn't engage youth voters and voter turnout. I think it helps to have someone that does know what it's like to go through university and have a job market be what it is right now while carrying a debt load from a 4-year degree, or if you're looking at a 2-year degree or whatever. And I think just us being there also helps bring those issues that young voters specifically care about to light. My first term, I had a member who said, well, I don't know why we need to increase higher education funding. Just go mow lawns for the summer like I did. And I was like, so you could do that every single day and have 2 more jobs, and you're still not going to afford your tuition, right? And so I think when it comes to campaign world, or just in our role as government officials and public servants, it is, you know, I would challenge younger Kansans that we always hear they're the next generation and things like that, which is true, but like, even if you're not 18, you can't vote yet, you still have a voice. We have email inboxes that we check. We don't have staff that do that. And so making sure that we know who you are, what you care about, and the issues that are important to you, you're going to actually, I think, find more allies in the state legislature that agree with you that can bring those issues to light.
Yeah, I agree.
Other questions? Yes, in the back.
You all had a little bit of a tangent earlier, but do you think social media just makes democracy harder?
Yes, and I say that as someone who likes to, like, at 8 p.m. be like, oh, bring it, and send it right back to them, right? I think it does make things more difficult. I think the beauty of this is that social media platforms give everyone a platform. I think the downside is that it gives everyone a platform. And so I don't think that we can't limit someone's ability to speak, but at the same time, I do think that we can go touch grass and get outside and get off of our screen time. Like, you know, obviously in this job, I feel like I'm just like living on my phone half the time during session or outside of session. And I even noticed for myself my mental health declining when I've spent too much time just focusing on like what we're doing a 14-hour day, then doom scrolling TikTok or whatever, right? And so I've like made it my own mission of like, okay, I'm gonna go work out, I'm gonna go walk for a walk, I'm gonna be outside. I think the more that we can step away from the digital world is the better, but at a time where AI, you can't turn on the TV, you can't turn on a podcast, you can't even like pull up an app on your phone without an AI-generated like suggested message, right? So the challenge is figuring out how to step away from it while we are becoming increasingly reliant on technology.
Yeah, I think it's great in a way of like we get to push our message, especially going back to the last question of how do we reach the younger generation, and it is through digital media, unfortunately, I guess. But you know, there's also so many different fake news stories or things that are not true that immediately people take as truth, and I think we kind of lost the you know, check and verify portion of our critical thinking, and so I think that's we're not going to ever see social media probably go away, but we can start to incorporate some of those things of maybe I don't, you know, become a keyboard warrior. Maybe I just go and take that friend out to coffee, or I don't think we need to end friendships over, you know, political disagreements. We need to learn how to disagree, and social media doesn't really help. It just kind of makes that issue worse. But I think we're going to live with it, and we as a society need to figure out how do we continue on as a community united, but not being, you know, letting it be destroyed on social media. I don't have the answer. As someone who's in the marketing industry, it is my job to tell businesses how to be successful on social media. It's just, you know, something that we got to figure out. And my, you know, plea to all of you is just, you know, text a friend and have that conversation with them, or get it face to face. You don't need to post about it or try to, you know, enrage someone on social media. It's not necessary, and it's not effective either.
And I think picking up the phone and humanizing it. I called the Speaker of the House on Christmas, on Thanksgiving, and on his birthday, because he's like everyone's grandpa in that building, right? And you just like treat him like the human he is. And I think that's led to some really productive conversations as well. Just, step away from the screen and pick up the phone.
It's harder to yell at somebody to their face. It's way easier to do it behind a screen. Yeah.
We have time for one more question. Yes?
I'm wondering what your opinion is on civility, and I'm wondering, after President Trump leaves the White House, do you think Washington, D.C. will become more civil again?
I think that's hard to say. I think on a state level, I love it because I see more change and impact in working together. And you know what, as a state, it's fun to be able to get to do that and see that and to work in Topeka. I don't know what's to come for that political environment in DC. I do hope that there are more relationships like Representative Woodard and I's that can be highlighted and shown as an example of how to work together.
Yeah, and I think we've made it too easy for our public servants and elected officials in DC to hop on a plane and go home, right? There's this reward to get on CNN or Fox News or MSNBC as much as you can and go out and fundraise, because money in politics is what it is. And there's just no incentive for them to stick around in DC and hang out and get to know each other as humans. So I think that's something that we got to figure out. At the state level, I think the difference is the state might shut down on a snow day, but we're already there and stuck there. It's like, well, I guess we're going to go pass whatever bill's there because they're not going to give us a snow day here. And then, well, it's snowing, I can't go home, so what's everyone up to now, right? And it's like a lot of those dinners are like us all trekking through the snow, trying to like figure out what's open and what's not. I think that we have to go back to the days of, I think of John McCain and just that like debate or town hall forum when he was running against Barack Obama, and a woman was like saying whatever she was saying about him, and McCain stopped her and said, no, he's a decent man. We disagree on issues, but like he is a good person. He's a family man. He's a father. I think we all have to be willing. We make it too incentivized to be partisan, and I think we have to bring back the days of where elected officials were incentivized and rewarded because of their ability to work with one another.
We've heard so much tonight about how politics and government and public policy is very people-centered. I think that's a good thing for democracy. It's a good thing for us all to keep in the back of our head. So thank you for joining us. Thank you both. What a delight it was to be able to speak with you and hear your insights. We will be back here 2 weeks from today. We have another interesting program with 2 journalists who are going to talk about the connection between journalism and civic engagement, whether there should be a connection. So I hope you can join us, and thank you for being here today.
Thank you all.
We did a.
All right, now it's our musical thing.
You what?
Now it's our musical thing.
Yeah.
You ready?